Welcome to the Dateable AF podcast. I'm Dr. Sarah Kyle, a therapist in private practice.
And I'm Rachel Howell, a qualitative researcher.
Each week, we break down the emotional patterns behind dating, love, conflict, and connection, and what actually helps people build relationships that last. Hello, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 3 of the Dateable AF podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about shame and defensiveness in relationships and why you might feel accused when no one is even accusing you.
I feel shame for y'all because y'all lost to me so bad in dominoes last night. I feel shame for y'all.
On our behalf.
On your behalf.
It was a rough game, y'all. I think Rachel had like a quarter of the amount of points of anybody else in the game. I think she was probably cheating, but I don't know for sure. So I don't want to accuse her.
Well, you just did kind of, but my dominoes were falling.
Ooh, it was a rough night. But here we are talking about shame. So if you have ever experienced the fear that grips your heart, if somebody says, hey, can we talk? And what your nervous system hears is, oh, you screwed something up, you're in trouble. I think that sometimes what someone says to us and how shame might translate that for us are two different things. And so on today's episode, we don't want to talk about who's right. We want to talk about why sometimes information that's neutral can feel like an attack. So shame doesn't say you made a mistake. Shame is something that says you are the mistake.
Don't you think that what goes hand in hand with this too is if you consider yourself a perfectionist? A lot of times I think that those things can easily be connected.
I think you're absolutely right. That if you are a perfectionist and someone calls out something that was imperfect on your part, that sometimes you take that as a personal failing. It's not that you did something wrong, it's that you are bad.
Well, I'm just going to dive right into this conversation, that those things like perfection, those things can come from the very early years. And if you feel a sense of needing to be perfect, oftentimes I find that I have a couple of very important people in my life that are perfectionists that do feel shame. And because they were given a signal in their very early years that if they got something wrong, that there was something fundamentally wrong with them. And as a kid, can you imagine? I mean, because as kids, we screw shit up all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it depends, like if the message that you got from your family of origin was, oh, you made a mistake, it's okay, let's figure out how to fix it. That's one thing. But like you're talking about, if the message you got was you made a mistake, therefore something is inherently wrong with you, man, that's a hard one to get over.
And this is really informing relationships, both friendships, dating relationships, any kind of relationship. This is a part of it's a good reason to spend time getting to know somebody and really listening to them, because I grew up where we just kind of were expected to make some mistakes, I guess. I don't know. I didn't mind making, and or I just sort of didn't carry a load around that. And then having been very closely attached to some people who would make mistakes and you would think that the world was coming to an end.
Yeah.
And I thought they just didn't do a good job of laughing at themselves. But it's deeper than that. It's deeper than that. It's not funny.
Yeah. Right. And I will say, I don't remember any overt messages I got as a kid about being perfect, but definitely I was terrified of making a mistake. And so I was one of those people. I couldn't laugh at myself and I couldn't just raise my hand and say, my bad. I had to go to many years of therapy before I could get there. And I don't know what it was. Like I said, I didn't get, my parents weren't overly harsh with me as far as punishing me if I did something wrong, but there was just always this fear of I didn't have the relationship where I could go to them and say, "Hey, mom, I screwed something up. Can you help me?" I never felt like that.
On some of the readings that I was doing and while I was researching this topic, the other connection it is to shame. It is when you have some childhood trauma,
Mhm.
and so of many types. And I also think that maybe that trauma could be where things are so tense that you're trying to disappear, like you're trying to become wallpaper, you know, that you really don't want to be seen. And if you are, you're terrified that you're going to do the wrong thing that's going to draw attention to you in the wrong way.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, that you're just trying to fly under the radar and a mistake calls attention to you. And I want to differentiate, and I think you're probably going to talk more about this as you dive into the research, but that guilt or regret can be an appropriate, let me say that differently. Regret can be an appropriate feeling because that's the thing that keeps us from repeating a mistake that we made. It's like, man, I really regret that I did that. I don't want to do that again. Guilt is a feeling that we feel if we broke a rule or we're disappointing someone else. But shame is different than both of these because shame is like, I am bad. Like, not that I did something wrong, but I am something wrong. So shame really attacks your identity, not your behavior. And I think it shows up in relationships because when you're in a relationship, you're being seen by another person. And that's the thing that brings up this shame. Like, the more somebody matters to you, the louder that shame can get if you're afraid of losing them.
I do think it's a common mix-up of terms.
Mhm.
And I do think people think if they have identified that shame is a bad shame is sort of identified as not a productive emotion.
No, it is
It
not.
doesn't it's a self-punishing emotion. But guilt has its use, and that it is okay for us to feel bad when we've done something to hurt somebody, even if it's not intentional,
Sure.
to uh, so that we can do a correction on that. But that's a situation. It's not a statement on your who you are as
Your
a
character.
person.
Right.
And right.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've seen people push back and get those things very tangled up that where they don't want to they don't want either of them. Like, no,
Yeah.
you fucked that up. You did that wrong. You need to apologize for that.
Well, I only did that because
Exactly. Yeah. We're not trying to let you out of that shit right there. You need to own it.
you gotta own it. Exactly. Hopefully owning it without feeling a bunch of shame. Defensiveness actually shows up as like a nervous system move. It's not a character flaw, but I do think it's a learned behavior. And I think it's triggered by something that happens in our nervous systems when we feel like we need to protect ourselves or we need to defend our identity. It's kind of an emotional armor that people put up, but it is not productive.
One of the pieces that I did pull up in the research that was really just shows you the degree to which people hold on to or how serious this is for people that actually experience a lot of shame. It was a research study. For those of you in our audience that don't know, most people do. Brene Brown is, like the guru-ess of shame.
And vulnerability research. Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
Amazing.
she's very well known. This was actually a study that she found in some of her research. So it's by a different researcher that she respects a lot. And it was interesting because there was participants, they did what they were looking at was they were paying these people to participate to respond to some verbiage. And it was about it was a shame study. And they had a choice of first they got paid. The more honest they were, the more willing they were to own something, then the more money they got from the researchers, right? So The one study had them talking about how often they had cheated on something.
Like on a test
Okay,
or
a
on
test,
okay.
just anything, but cheated on, and these are college kids,
Okay.
and they earned the most money there. They were willing to own it. Then they took the same group through and asked them to identify themselves in certain ways as cheaters,
Mm.
and they did, even for the money, weren't willing. And so, yeah, I feel like it was a really interesting distinction because that's language, right? But
Yeah.
it is a definition of the difference between having cheated and being identified as a cheater, which is a fundamental character flaw, right?
Yeah. It's the difference between behavior and identity, exactly what we were talking about. So they could identify I behaved badly, but they didn't want to identify themselves with that character flaw, like you said. I that seems really positive
It is
that these people
positive.
weren't carrying a lot of shame because they were saying, yeah, I did this bad thing, but I'm not a bad person.
Yes. And or they were definitely unwilling to, but it is good because it exemplifies you identifying yourself as someone who has cheated, but that you are not fundamentally a cheater. Now, there are some people out there that are fundamental cheaters.
Yes, that's true. That is true. So, if you're someone who feels that sense of shame, or maybe you feel scared that you are a cheater or that you are this bad thing, do you think that's more likely to bring up defensive behaviors?
Oh, yeah. I absolutely, because you think about it, that's really hard to hold. Nobody wants, just like these, like nobody wants that. And I think you very quickly, you're going to have a defensive reaction if you think that somebody is defining your character in that way.
Yes, I think that's right. And I want to, I want to get into this more today about what happens when that defensiveness kicks in and maybe what makes people automatically feel accused when they're not being accused. I mean, I've I've talked about this before with Joe that she's, worked on this a lot and gotten so much better, but that her family automatically jumps to defending themselves even when no one's attacking them. And the example I know I've given before on the podcast is that if I ask her if she knows where something is, like, "Hey, do you know where the, mustard is in the fridge?" And she'll be like, "I didn't take it." It's like, "Girl, I was not accusing you of taking it." Anyway, she has worked on that a lot and has gotten way better, but it is that feeling of why do some people automatically feel like they have to defend themselves even when no one's attacking them?
Yeah. This I'm gonna do another kind of connection to dating, is that this is something that if you are dating someone, you should pay attention. You can spot it if you're paying attention. Uh,
Yes.
that if you get these sort of very knee-jerk reactions to something that you feel like was sort of a simple like that, "Have you seen my keys? I don't ever touch your keys. You're the only one. You must have," and you're like, "What the hell? Where are my
What?
keys?
Yeah.
Did you see my keys or not?" You know?
Yes.
Um, and don't fool yourself, because if those seem like small little things, but it's in there, like it's
Yeah.
fundamentally in there.
Yes, for sure. And I think those behaviors show up in some different ways. One of them is sort of counterattacking, like you said, you must have put them somewhere, or explaining or justifying themselves. Sometimes people withdraw when they get defensive, that they're going to just shut down, or they get sarcastic with you. And I think the thinking behind this is that if I don't protect myself, I'm going to get emotionally annihilated. Like somebody's gonna crush me if I don't defend myself.
Mhm. Yep. Well, I mean, it just has a value system inside of them that if you don't necessarily, if that's not your go-to, it's hard for you to understand in the moment.
Yeah.
Like, why are they responding like that? I don't get it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that's based on like we said earlier, patterns that you learn from old relationships. Like you said, when you were growing up, you felt like it was okay to make mistakes, and for whatever reason, I did not feel like that. I think if you grew up in an environment where having emotions led to conflict, that you might be more inclined to protect yourself. Or I think also if your needs led to disappointment, like your system learned that being seen is dangerous. If you needed something from your parents or your caregivers and that need didn't get met, then you were exposed and vulnerable. And so I think that leads people to put up their walls.
But I've often said, because again, I have spent some time around some people in my life who are extremely smart and they get a lot of things right. So when they don't get things right, that's a very tough road. I, on the other hand, I am a smart person, but I don't expect to get a bunch of things right. And I have often said that it is a real blessing to be in this position because
you're accustomed to making mistakes or getting wrong. Is that what you're saying?
I'm like, oh, did I misspell that? Well, damn. Yeah, I have laughed often because I don't know why. I mean, I'm competitive, and so I like to win at things, as you know.
Clearly. Dominoes.
But I sort of look at that stuff and I'm like, I don't know. I'm kind of like, do. Whatever.
When I just respond to your text message with a bunch of question marks, which means I didn't understand anything.
I do. But on a serious, a flip side of that, since I tend to on this show be the one to like show my underwear,
oh really
dirty laundry out here, is that I will use myself as an example of something that is like me learning about the shame in my life. Is that because mine was, as Sarah does know, attached to cheating, and not just cheating on tests, we'll say. That.
Are we really going there?
I'm talking about myself. I'm talking about me.
Okay.
Keeping it real. Here we go. And I did do a lot of exploration on that. And there are things that like it did make me feel that way. So I don't generally feel shame. So I knew that when I began to feel shame about that situation, that I needed to hopscotch my butt right on over to a therapist and figure that out, because it wasn't an emotion that was typical in my life. And so therapists are amazing if you get a good one. And she was great. And I did the work. And I am here to say that I don't feel that at all. I have great confidence in myself, in my abilities in those ways. Great confidence for anybody out there that might be wondering. I've since left that behind me, and
changed your ways, y'all.
I did. So I also wanted to speak to the fact that this isn't something that you have to live with just because it was instilled in you when you were younger.
Yeah, absolutely. That there is a lot of work to be done. And I will say the same, that doing a lot of work in therapy is what allowed me to learn that it is okay to be imperfect. Everybody's imperfect. And, I'm just like the rest of the humans out there. And when that shame comes up, if you find yourself feeling defensive or self-protective, your brain's not really asking for the truth. Your brain is scanning for threat. So your nervous system is looking out there to see if you're about to be attacked and asking do I feel unsafe right now? And I think that what happens with shame is that it kind of shuts everything down. And so instead of being able to say like, oh man, I felt hurt when this person said this, the shame turns it into a defensive move, or even sometimes an attack. Like, oh, this is, this person's attacking me, or, yeah, I'm a bad person, therefore this person's attacking me. And shame just shuts the whole system down. It's not helpful.
Well, I had some additional research. There's a lot of information about shame out there.
Yes.
And so I also wanted to bring in this other kind of really cool study related to some evidence-based ways of overcoming shame.
Okay.
There was a study done, it was in 2023 actually, that was part of Harvard Medical School. And they took a sample size of 68 college students, and what they did was I think, did a survey scale, a shame scale, which for those of
Mhm.
you that are not in the research world, there are certain scales that we can use out there that are evidence-based, that grounded in evidence, and they've been tested. And so there are several shame scales, but anyway, this one, and they pulled 68 students that had scored really high in the category of shame on that scale. So, meaning that they carried a lot of shame. And what they did was they took the group and they divided them in half. And so they had a treatment group and then they had a comparison group. In our world, that's half of them get the treatment to reduce shame and half of them get nothing.
Mhm.
And so the activity was that they took them through some exercises on how to write letters to themselves. And the letters were using 3 prompts of common humanity. So thinking about whatever it was that was bringing them shame and how other people, it happens to other people. People make mistakes,
Mhm.
identifying in the world that they are not the only person doing these things. And then self-kindness. So sort of like you would, if you were writing a letter to your friend and they were pouring their heart out about this, what would you say to them? Like, hey, girl, you got to forgive yourself about that. And then the other would be mindfulness. And that's more like sort of observing, let's say, your shame and watching it trickle down a stream like a leaf or something, just letting it go. So you're kind
Mhm.
of really visualizing that. And so they taught them how to write this letter. They spent 30 minutes a day, and I couldn't find how long the study lasted. I don't lasted. I don't think it was super long, but they wrote a letter to themselves 30 minutes a day over a period of time. And then they let a month pass at the end of the study and they went back. They saw the subjects' gains on the shame scale were great. Like they made medium to really significant effects, difference on the shame scale. And in the research world, that's anything from medium
The
to
shame
high.
so the shame was reduced.
Reduced.
They
Yes, yes.
scored lower on the scale after writing the letters. Got it.
They
Yeah,
did.
makes sense. Okay.
We call that, yeah, significant impact is hard to get in research. But
Sure.
anyway, the end of the day, they went back and they tested that group again a month later, and they held their results pretty significantly. So, this letter writing was seen as an actual successful evidence-based tool now to potentially be used to help people who are dealing with a lot of shame.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I guess that's one thing we could encourage our listeners to do is write themselves a letter, being compassionate and comparing themselves to how other people might handle a similar situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to me, I'm thinking think about when your friends are pouring their heart out to you and they feel so bad about something they've done. And we typically, first thing we do is say, hey, maybe you need to apologize, but don't beat yourself up about it.
Right. Yeah. And so using that same compassion with ourselves about it
Yeah.
is a good idea. Yeah. So if you haven't done that yet and you're still feeling defensive, let's talk about how that defensiveness can really kind of wreck communication with the people in your life. And it's funny, I see this a lot in my therapy office that people, one of the ways this shows up predominantly is people argue about tone instead of impact.
Mm.
So instead of saying, wow, that really hurt my feelings, they'll say, well, you were speaking to me in a disrespectful tone, or you sounded really snippy. Instead of saying, wow, that hurt my feelings. This is how your behavior impacted me. The other thing, kind of along those same lines, is that people want to litigate facts. Oh my God, this is just so exhausting. They'll be like, well, you said it was 7:30 and it wasn't 7:30, it was 7:28. And you're like, oh my
Oh,
God.
no. No. God.
Yes.
Poke
Listen,
my eyes
pay
out.
attention. You will hear this happening a lot. Or if you see people in an argument, you will see this happening a lot, that they want to get into the tiniest details about the facts when really that is not what matters. What matters is that you did something that hurt my feelings. And because I can defend myself about the facts all day long. No, that's not what happened. This other thing is what happened. Well, none of that matters. What matters is that somebody's feelings got hurt. But when people get defensive, they stop listening. And even if the person they're in the argument with is making some kind of bid for connection or bid for repair, they're not having it because their defenses are up and they are still trying to be right. They're still trying to litigate those facts. And what you got to realize is that you're trying to not feel bad. And at the end of the day, you staying in that defensive place is just going to continue to make you feel bad. It's going to make things worse. And so it's better to kind of drop your defenses and soften up a little bit.
Have you ever heard anyone, oh, it's litigating the facts makes me insane. It makes me crazy. And have you ever heard someone, when you approach them about something in a global way, like, hey, I feel like that, you're texting me 10 times a day and it feels like a little much.
I only texted you 8 times yesterday.
Or I didn't text you today yet. I'm like, I don't know what to do with that.
Right.
I'm trying to have a bigger conversation with you here.
But see, that is a perfect example of defensiveness. Like, but I was being nice. Yeah. Oh, it kills me. Kills me. Yes. So let's talk about what people can do instead of getting defensive. Like what actually helps when this comes up. I can tell you what doesn't work. Like telling someone just stop being defensive does not work.
It doesn't.
No, it's like telling someone to calm down. That's hard.
No, that's good.
Calm down. Oh, okay. I never thought of that. Yep. And like trying to force someone to be vulnerable when they're feeling defensive, also it's not going to work because they're scared. And, trying to win an argument with someone who's on the defensive, those things are just never going to work. So let's talk about what can work. And one of the things is if you're the person feeling defensive, just name out loud what's happening. Like, I notice I'm feeling accused, even though you're not accusing me of anything. And just naming that out loud, I think can go a long way and it stops an argument from happening.
Yeah. That's, and then separating identity from behavior.
Yeah. Yes. Like I am not a bad person. Even if I did something that wasn't great, that's not my identity. Like you said, I might have cheated on this test, but I am not a cheater.
And if somebody is approaching you when you're in the middle of this and somebody is approaching you with that sort of character assassination language, you need to pay attention to that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes. I think willingness to stay present with discomfort. So rather than just automatically jumping to your own defense, if you can just sit with the idea that this feels uncomfortable, like, wow, I think, maybe this person's accusing me of taking their keys and that feels uncomfortable. Then I think you'll eventually come around.
Where's the mustard?
They're not accusing you of stealing the mustard, actually. Okay.
They just want to make a sandwich.
Yes. And if you're unclear, you can ask the other person what they actually meant. Because just because you're uncomfortable doesn't mean you're in danger. And that may take a little while to rewire your nervous system to believing that. But if you're in a basically safe relationship, you can eventually get to the place where you realize that you're not in danger.
Don't you think, I think part of the reason that this is actually sort of hard and when you're trying to be in a relationship with someone is because both things are sort of triggering, right? The person who's has some deep shame issues, they're going to be triggered really quickly. And then I find that their trigger, because it seems inane, right? It seems crazy, like triggers me. Then
yes,
what the hell?
Then everybody's triggering everybody, and it's a shit show.
It is. So I do think that this is one of those times where it's great to take a deep breath. I like these suggestions that take a deep breath, step back, and think about the next thing you're going to say. Because that language that you use can be so crucial to this thing moving in a positive direction or a negative direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's talk about what takeaways we want our listeners to get from this episode. I think the first one that I want to really emphasize is that just because you're feeling accused about something doesn't mean someone is blaming you. So try to pause and listen to whether that person is actually accusing you of something or if you could be misinterpreting that.
And defensiveness, it's a sign of shame, but not evil. It's not a sign of evil, people. It's not the demons and the devil.
That's a good one for sure. And kind of on this note of feeling like a bad person or feeling worthy, that you don't have to prove that you're good in order to be loved or to be lovable. So let go of this idea that you have to be perfect.
And repair starts when you can stay open instead of armored. And that really does get back to a lot of the root of what we talk about in our podcast is staying open to emotional depth and connection. And that comes with a lot of exposure. And so we are talking about these things that can be very tender as you do that.
Yes, absolutely. If you want to talk to your partner, your sister, your friend about this idea of shame and defensiveness, here's a question that you can start with and ask someone you trust. Like, where do you notice yourself getting defensive? And maybe where do other people notice you getting defensive? Even in relationships where you really care about the person. So just invite that feedback and be willing to give the other person some feedback about that and just see where that conversation takes you. And, just again, I want to remind everybody that you don't have to be perfect to be close. You just have to be present.
So thank God you don't have to be perfect, because I would be, I would be in a very bad way.
We'd all be in big trouble if that were the case. Well, listeners, as always, we want to hear your feedback. We want to hear your comments. What did you think about this episode? Where do you notice shame or defensiveness coming up in your life, and what have you done about it? Please send us an email. We would love to hear from you. Our email address is info@dateableaf.com. You can also follow us on Instagram or message us on Instagram. We are @dateableaf. And as always, we want to thank you for listening to the Dateable AF podcast, where we help you find your happy ending.
And remember, be bold, be kind, and for the love of self-respect, don't text your ex. Stay dateable.
AF.